All right. Hello, football and Vikings fans. Welcome to Fox 9 Sports Live. This is our second episode of a new venture we're starting here at Fox 9. We're talking sports on a weekly basis and any big news or developments that come up. I am Jeff Wald, digital sports reporter. I'm joined by my guy, Ahmad Hicks with Fox 9 Sports on TV. You might have seen him previously with some Vikings coverage last year or the PJ Flex show, Gophers coaches show. You're all over the place, Ahmad. How are we doing today?
Doing good. Just trying to keep up with all this Vikings news. His mandatory minicamp is set to begin tomorrow, and then of course training camp several weeks after that. So trying to get the latest with Danielle Hunter and the rest of the squad.
It's amazing how this team just makes news without even being on the football field. I mean, we were all kind of wondering late last week, it was inevitable that Dalvin Cook was going to get cut just based on that whole situation. So that was no surprise on Friday. The next two dominoes that we were waiting on were Danielle Hunter and Justin Jefferson. We're going to mainly talk Danielle Hunter today. Reports from the NFL Network emerged this morning that he is going to skip out on mandatory minicamp. And the key word there is mandatory. NFL players are subject to fines for not showing up to mandatory minicamp. So obviously this is nothing short of a money situation. Danielle Hunter is due only $5.5 million this year after having 10.5 sacks last season, 17 games. It was his first fully healthy season, I think, since 2019, if I remember right. What's your take on all this, and should Vikings fans be alarmed by this news today?
Absolutely not. Everybody knew this was the offseason of change coming, right? It was either change in contracts or change of the roster, and everything has taken place just the way we had envisioned after that loss to the Giants in the playoffs. Danielle Hunter getting paid $5.5 million, or getting set to be paid $5.5 million, is grossly underpaid for him and his value and the position he plays. Those guys make a ton of money, and I'm a firm believer that nobody in the NFL that wears that suit and armor, that steps in between those white lines each and every Sunday, should take a discount, no matter what. We saw what happened with Damar Hamlin in the Cincinnati game versus Buffalo. These guys are going to war literally every weekend, and I don't believe they should take a pay cut. And I think if you're a pass rusher, and a good pass rusher at that, one that has over 45.5 sacks in the last 4 seasons, I think you're worth quite a bit of money, especially with Zadarius Smith. He's gone. He's out of the picture. So who's going to be rushing the quarterback? So I think the leverage is in Danielle Hunter's hand, and I think he was right by holding out, or at least holding out for minicamp. Now it's just to see if the team is going to call his bluff. And I think this will be another unfolding saga that continues all throughout training camp, more than likely, because I'm sure the number that he wants is something that the Vikings can't necessarily afford this year.
This is sort of where I wish that show Ballers on HBO. I wonder how close to reality that actually is. When you hear those conversations between GMs or front office staffers and agents, you wonder how real life those type of conversations really are. Because like we've talked about, he's set to make $5.5 million this year. Like you said, that's grossly underpaid. We're talking about a guy who had 10.5 sacks last year, fastest in NFL history to at least 50 career sacks in his first 5 seasons. And before signing a 5-year, $72 million deal in 2018, he then went on to get 14.5 sacks in each of the next 2 seasons. So he's proven on the field in his play that when he's healthy, he's one of the best edge rushers in the league. And let's not confuse ourselves with this scheme last year. Danielle Hunter is a defensive end. He's a rush end. He's not an outside linebacker. To me, that's only words. But my confusion is that there are some reports that emerged late last week that the Vikings are potentially shopping him for a trade. That has me a little concerned. I mean, I know you can get a lot for him, and that's great, but we're still talking about one of the premier edge rushers in the game right now. So that's where I'm a little concerned.
You're right. You are talking about a premier edge rusher, and you're also talking about how you can't win championships without defense. But what you also have to mention when you're talking about those couple of things is that the Vikings don't have any space in their salary cap right now to pull off big acquisitions, to go out and go get people that complement their team. And I think if you're going to give a big bulk of money to Danielle Hunter, what are you going to do in that secondary? You still have 3 corners that haven't proven themselves, really. Byron Murphy, yeah, but Andrew Booth Jr., Caleb Evans. What are you going to do right there? Then you're talking about your secondary, Cam Bynum, Harrison Smith. Well, none of those guys are all pro guys right now. Harrison Smith is towards the end of his career, so you're going to have to replace him sooner rather than later. So you have a lot of holes that you have to fill. And I don't think getting a trade and getting multiple picks or getting multiple assets is such a bad thing, because if we're looking at the broader scope of things right now, this is the final season of Kirk Cousins' contract. This means a rebuild is possibly likely in the near future for the Vikings. How they go about that? Do they want to be competitive? Do they just want to tank and just implode and then go get their quarterback of their future? Change is coming. It has to happen here in Minnesota. We can't keep hanging on to these guys that's been around for 5 to 10 years that are fan favorites. They're great in the community, but they haven't brought Minnesota a Super Bowl, and they're probably not. So I think you need to go out and you need to go get assets. You need to go get depth, and you need to help people that's going to build this team for the future, because I hate to say it, Danielle Hunter is really good, and he is one of the premier edge rushers. But how many more years does he have left in him to be a premier edge rusher? Do you want to be giving $10+ million a year to a guy that may only have 3 to 4 years left in him? Really, really good years. So I think right now they need to be getting as much depth and as many pieces as they can moving forward, whether that's young players or draft picks.
Just to be clear here, people see me moving around and shaking my arm here. My dog's right next to me, so I'm trying to keep running the video. I want to touch on Kirk Cousins just to kind of pivot for a second before we get back to more on Danielle. I'm sure you saw all the Bleacher Report video this morning on Twitter going around.
Cam Jordan. Mm-hmm.
Cam Jordan at the Von Miller pass rushing clinic, I think it was, talking about Kirk. I thought that was hysterical.
Call those Kirk Cousins, yeah.
I thought that was hysterical. I mean, we all know that athletes love to trash talk each other. Kirk is really pretty quiet on that front. He doesn't have a whole lot to say about opponents, but I find it interesting. A guy in a defensive line that has not fared well against the Vikings and against Kirk Cousins didn't hesitate to chirp the current franchise quarterback. What were your thoughts on that?
It's all fun and games. I saw it. I didn't think too much about it. The one thing that I've learned about these Minnesota fans here in this year that I've been around is that they're very passionate and very loyal, and they don't like when anybody talks trash about their quarterback, but they're allowed to say all the bad things in the world that they want to say about their quarterback. So, look, I think Kirk Cousins is a top 16 quarterback in the NFL, but I also don't think that's saying much. I think to be elite and to win Super Bowls, you have to be a top 5 quarterback. And although he was top 5 in passing yards last year, he was in the bottom 16 in QBR. So this is a guy who's had a ton of chances, and I think the team has pretty much said, look, we're all in, all or nothing this year. We got you another star wide receiver. We got you one of the best tight ends in the National Football League. You got Justin Jefferson, the best wide receiver in the NFL. So I think this year is a make it or break it year for Kirk. You say you either go out there, throw 35+ touchdowns, make a deep run in the playoffs, you get your extension here in Minnesota you want. You go out there, you lay an egg, you don't do what you're supposed to do, you fold in the playoffs, you have bad QBRs against really good teams in primetime games, he'll be looking for a new home next year.
You put it politically correctly that Vikings fans, when it comes down to the real world, they are overly sensitive. And as someone who has followed this team for 3 decades, that is 100% the truth. And we have enough war wounds to be that way, I guess.
I love it though. Support your fan base, support your team, ride or die for them. I love it. I just think that sometimes you have to be realistic about what's going on.
Pivoting back a little bit to Danielle, obviously it sounds like the workouts start tomorrow and they continue through Wednesday at TCO. It sounds like he's not going to be there at all. Is it a little surprising that maybe he wouldn't at least just show up and not do anything, or is this just him saying, you know what, no, I'm not going to do anything until I know I have a contract in hand?
I'm not a professional football player, nor did I play that game at the highest level like these guys, but you're talking about going out there, you could pull a hamstring stretching, you could get off the ball and you could tear an Achilles, you could make the wrong turn and tear your ACL, and then the first thing the team is going to say to you, well, you're damaged goods now, you're not worth what you want, so why would you risk injury going out there? And I'm not to be on the player side and to say, hey, he's been a bad teammate, because you want to be around during things like this, but he's been around for quite a few years. He's proven what he can do for this team. I don't think he needs to be a mandatory minicamp where you're kind of going 70% through things, you're telling players to stay up, don't go to the ground, you don't want to risk injuries, training camp is right around the corner. I think the bigger bone to pick is if he decides to skip out on training camp for a new contract. I think that's when the red flags need to start going off and the sirens need to start going off. But right now I don't think it's that big of a deal. He wants his money, and why risk injury while trying to get some more money?
Will start to panic and get a little tense when they hear that, because if you don't show up to a mandatory workout, it's $100,000 fine. And let's be honest, in his world, that's walking around money.
Yeah, I mean, I think everybody in Minnesota will start to panic if we get to the first preseason game and Danielle Hunter is not here, and we're trying out Dean Lowry or Harrison Phillips, as the starting defensive ends, and then you're starting to question like, all right, well, what's the makeup of this team? Because you can't lose a guy like Danielle Hunter to start the season. You can't afford for him to say, hey, I'll skip, 5 to 6 games until I get what I want, because you don't have the depth that you need to be successful, especially with the conference and the schedule that they have this season. So they need all their guys, and they need to figure this out. But General Manager Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah has his work cut out for him. That's for certain.
Let's talk a little bit about what that defensive line is going to look like tomorrow. Now that you don't have Zadarius Smith because of the trade, Danielle Hunter won't be there. You've got guys like
Tomlinson.
No Dalvin Tomlinson. You've got guys like Harrison Phillips and Dean Lowry and Marcus Davenport who will be there, and a couple of other veterans that are back with the Vikings this year. I'm blanking on names right now, to be honest, but it's going to certainly.
That says a lot that you're blanking on names. That says a lot for a guy who covers the team. That if you're blanking on names, imagine how other guys around the NFL are when they're talking about that defense, and if that defense is striking fear in their hearts. I know Brian Flores is bringing in a new scheme and whatnot, but you still got to have dogs at the end of the day. You got to have dogs that can play man-to-man coverage, that can find the football and go get it and make a tackle. And if you're blanking on names right now, it's either up to them to make themselves household names, or you're headed into the season with some problems if you're the Vikings.
Right. And like we've said, there's some holes at almost every level of this defense, or at least names that have yet to prove themselves in an NFL game situation consistently. I mean, there's so much of the talk all offseason has been about Brian Flores and what he's going to do to change this defense. We have yet to see any of it just because it's been all voluntary offseason workouts. We're obviously not going to see a ton at mandatory minicamp. You're probably not even going to see a ton at training camp until the preseason starts. Cam might have made a good point of like, of how it might look in the secondary about whether they're going to play zone and, try to ball hawk for interceptions, whether they're going to play man and try to blitz and put pressure on the quarterback. And he just can't wait until he sees it live. We don't know when we're going to see it live, but what do you kind of make of what this might look like right now?
Well, one day we were out at organized team activities, and I saw, 7 men at the line of scrimmage on the defensive side. And then Dean Lowry was dropping back and covering a wheel route coming out the backfield while the safety blitzed off the edge. So not giving away too much about what Brian Flores has going on, but I think creativity, it's going to be a old chip off the block from a Mike Zimmer defense where you have 11 different people at the line of scrimmage. Then the quarterback has to decipher who's coming and who's not coming. And I think that helps a lot when you don't have athletic players. And I'm not saying that the Vikings don't have athletic players, but when you're talking about top 5 in their positions, they don't have many of those type of players on their roster. So when you don't have those type of elite playmakers on your roster, well, you got to be creative. You got to help put them in the right position to make plays. And I think that's all to be determined as of right now. But Brian Flores has a track record of making the right calls and putting the right players in the right right positions to make plays. So I guess we'll see, how that comes to light later on in the fall, in the preseason and the regular season. But right now, I think they'll be aggressive, they'll be creative, they'll be fast and physical. And I think, that's the start to having a good defense.
You mentioned top 5 players at position, but we'll try to wind this down here for today with this and maybe a couple more talking points going forward. But one player who is a top 5 player in his position is Justin Jefferson, and he's been one of the big questions this offseason. He still has 2 years left on his current deal. He is criminally underpaid with what his skill is. Led the NFL last year in receiving yards and receptions. Flirted with Calvin Johnson's historical mark at times toward the end of the year. Do we expect to see him tomorrow? I personally expect to, I'm not going to be there. I'm on vacation, but if I were there, I would expect to see him there, but I certainly don't think he's going to do a lot.
Jefferson will probably be there. Now you're talking about unnecessary fines that he doesn't have to rack up. He's going to get paid. He knows he's going to get paid. It's a matter of when, as he told KJ Osborne, don't worry about the money. The money will come. And I think that's something that he understands. And I think he's proved himself the last 3 seasons to say, hey, I don't need to be at organized team activities. I'll be ready when training camp rolls around. I'll be ready for mandatory minicamp. And most importantly, I'll be ready when the season rolls around. So I don't think we should be worried about anything with Justin Jefferson. I'm sure he'll be there tomorrow. He'll have his grills in. He'll have his glasses on. He'll have a smile on his face. He'll be lighting up, around everybody. And he'll enjoy his time, and we'll enjoy seeing him back around the guys. But his contract is something that we'll talk about a lot, I'm sure, as the season plays out, because it's going to be a matter of what Brinks truck are you backing up, and if you're bringing two for him. And so it's just a matter of when he's going to get his money. I don't think it's a problem. Kwesi's not letting him leave Minnesota, and if he does, he may need to look for another job. So I think he's safe here. Nobody needs to worry about that.
Well, you mentioned that. And that's where, to me, the messaging has been so interesting over the last, 10 days to 2 weeks, actually, really the entire offseason. Kwesi Adofo-Mensah said on the record at the NFL Combine to a group of reporters, one of my top priorities is bringing Justin Jefferson back. We talked about it during our first show last week. He was asked multiple times about Dalvin Cook, one of the top 5, top 10 running back in the league last year. The stats don't lie. Every single time he was asked about Cook's future, he dodged it with a bullet. I mean, you could not possibly toe the line more than he did. So when you do that versus when you say, I'm doing everything I can to bring Justin Jefferson back, just what does that tell you about their priorities?
Well, I think it speaks volumes to the league and the direction the league is heading in. It's a passing league. And look, Alexander Mattison is here for 2 years, $7 million. You're telling me he's worth $3.5 million compared to Dalvin being worth $10 million in a season. You're going to pass the ball a lot like the Vikings did last year, or, try and start it with the play action and then go to what you do, which is passing the ball to Justin Jefferson and TJ Hockenson. There's not a lot of room to pay a running back $10 million. And I think Justin Jefferson, he's a generational talent. When you look at the immediate impact he had when he entered the NFL to this recent season, he's a superstar. I mean, he has every young kid in the world doing the gritty dance, every sport taking up the gritty. This is an icon, not just in the game of football, but in fashion and everything that I feel like he does in life. So I think this is just something that the Vikings understand. They can't let go. Dalvin Cook, 6 great years here in Minnesota. He did some phenomenal things for them, but you guys know how it is in the NFL. The average lifespan of an NFL running back is 4 to 6 seasons. At the age of 28, they start looking at them like damaged goods, and Dalvin will be 28 on August 10th. So, it's kind of just a byproduct of the environment. As far as Justin Jefferson, I think his future here is safe as long as the team can make sure that he has somebody to throw him the ball. And if it's not Kirk Cousins next year, then who? Because if you go into the offseason next year and Kirk Cousins, you say, hey, he's not our guy moving forward, then Justin is like, whoa, why would I sign for another 5 to 6 years for $100 million? Yeah, I love that, but I want to win a Super Bowl. So I think, he has to be able to win and get paid. So, I think this is a something that's going to drag out throughout the entire season, something we'll talk about. Ask the front office, why haven't they gotten the deal done? And I'm sure Jefferson will come out and say, look, hasn't gotten done to this point. We're going to focus on it in the offseason. Right now, I'm just here to play football and try and go win a Super Bowl. So that's what I think.
And you mentioned that, and to this point, he's said and done all the right things. I mean, he's been the consummate teammate. If he's done any griping, it's been behind closed doors, and very little of it has become public. I did laugh because I think it was before you got here last year, but he was asked last offseason about the contract situation. I can't remember who exactly asked him about it, but he said at the time, I think he was joking, but he said, hey, listen, guys, I'm not too fond of money. It's like, well, when we see you in the locker room with your shades and your chain and your grill on, every pro athlete likes a little bit of cash. Let's not lie to ourselves here, but you can also do that and still be grounded. And it certainly feels like he's that type of guy.
I don't know anything about his financials. I'm not in his pockets whatsoever, but I do think his older brother has instilled a lot of confidence in him and a lot of leadership and a lot of wisdom into how to play this game. And if one had to guess, I'm pretty sure that Jets is living off of his endorsement money right now and probably not even spending his contract money, if I had to guess. And I'm sure that his brother is marketing him so well right now that whenever he does get that big lucrative contract, he can just invest that and won't need to spend it, because I'm sure he'll have so much money coming in and endorsements, he'll be fine. So this is a guy who is capitalizing off of his name, image, and likeness. And I think he will be bigger than football when it's all said and done.
Well, with that, we will wrap this up. The only thing I'm bummed about is I can't rip you for your height today because we're both sitting down. That was a fun moment to start our series last week. I will be out at TCO on Wednesday. I'm assuming you'll be out there tomorrow, or I know we'll have people out there tomorrow.
Yes, we'll have people out there all week long, of course, so they can find all the coverage on Fox 9 or Fox 9 Plus or Fox9.com for sure.
And we will see what Kevin O'Connell has to say tomorrow, plus whoever we can grab coming off the field. And it's sort of the non-football football season. So let's see how everything shakes out this week.